Right, hey guys, how are we doing? Back into the video from Anime News, and today we're checking out the cut content for Season 2, Episode 12 of Solo Leveling, so the second to last episode. I've watched the last one, because I just had to, because there's no way I could have avoided spoilers. As soon as I woke up the next day, it was just everywhere, so yeah, as soon as the last episode's cut content comes out, we can check that out straight away. But this is the second to last one. Really, really intrigued to see, because I've seen people post comments on certain things about certain changes. So I was like, no, I need to see it. I need to use this thing to confirm. Apparently, the fight with Sung Jin Woo and the Ant King was made Sung Jin Woo seem a little bit weaker than in the original. I was like, well, that can't be right. So let's get into it.
If every episode got the same treatment that this one did, then Perfect wouldn't even begin to describe this adaptation.
One of the only few animated episodes, I do believe as well, to score 9.99 on IMDb.
I'm not just talking about the stellar animation which brought this fight to life,
So
but
cool.
also the pacing, tone, and even anime original changes which built upon it.
Oh, okay.
Like, we know the Ant King has a skill which allows him
Gluttony,
to obtain
yeah.
the powers of those he eats, yet in the manhwa and novel he doesn't even use them.
Oh.
He has 5+ S ranks in his stomach, yet for some reason doesn't make use of any of their abilities. So, to see the Ant King use these ice powers here in the anime,
Oh, that's so sick. Wow. Okay.
well, that's a change I very much welcome.
Yeah, that's so cool. All right. So this wasn't even in the... Wow.
It shows the Ant King is constantly evolving in a way that perfectly suits him.
Yeah.
This then allowed them to make the fight a lot more even, which in comparison to the novel and manhwa, was, as you'd expect, a one-sided beatdown.
Right.
So
Okay.
it's here the episode sees its biggest changes, since a large majority of the fight was given through the perspective of others. It's an interesting way to portray what's usually Sung thinking about how strong he's grown. So, if you want to see how this climactic fight differed between all three mediums,
Yeah.
stick around as we'll go through all of it.
Boss.
Episode 24, Are You the King of the Humans? Covering chapters 101 to 104 from the manhwa and chapters 118 to 121 from the web novel.
It's about the normal amount.
Let's start things off over at the TV station where, unlike how in the anime the feed disconnected due to a connection issue, the broadcast was actually cut off by the director himself.
Oh, okay.
As damaging as it was to his TV station, it was too much to show the country their strongest hunters
Getting killed,
and
right.
destroyed by a single ant. He refused to broadcast Ma's torture, then Min's subsequent death. This was when he believed everything was over, up until someone would report someone else had appeared on scene. The director believed the only person who could save him was Jesus, but what he saw on screen was probably close enough. No one
I
could
love
tell
that.
who it was or what they were capable of, but the presence of someone so apparently confident was enough for the director to make a gamble on him.
It's like, let's get back in.
There was a chance this person may not have been a hunter at all, but now the director was determined to see this broadcast through. It's then the story would rewind to a bit before Sung's arrival, where an emotional perspective was given from the cameraman.
I was gonna say, this guy's gone through... I love the memes. The most powerful character going. Or, the meme where it's, the cameraman being fast as anything, and he's, following the whole fight, just oh my god, oh. It's hilarious.
Despite being backed into a corner,
I mean, he was A rank, isn't he? I got it wrong. I said B rank last time. He's A rank.
he had zero regrets knowing this was his equivalent of going out in a fiery blaze of glory. He didn't consider himself a true hero like the S ranks who fought in front of him, but he was intent knowing he could at least support them. So, where before his life was nothing but menial jobs intended to slowly grow his career, now he was faced with an opportunity he'd never thought he'd get to be a part of. His position as a hunter, though one he wasn't very fond of, had allowed him to capture something no other cameraman on Earth has. He had shown the world his own country's hunters successfully defeating the boss of an S-rank gate. So, knowing he was the person who captured such footage, well, deep down he was incredibly proud since everyone would get to see the valiant sacrifice of the hunters who fought for them. To him, his life's work as both a cameraman and
Came
hunter
to
was
this
come
moment.
to fruition. If there was one thing he did feel regretful over, though, it was the devastating thought of never being able to see his father again. You see, as the person who took care of him after his mother died of cancer, knowing he'd never get to say goodbye really hurt. What went to hurt even more was that his last words were so mundane that the cameraman couldn't help but wish they could have talked for at least a little bit longer. Just as life always seemed to be, though, time was ruthless and regret always arrived one step too late. So, with zero energy left to activate any of his tank skills, the cameraman would apologize to his dad, then accept whatever fate was about to come to him.
Ah, right, cool. So he was in some sort of danger at some point. Okay.
What happened next was an incomprehensible sequence of events, since in one moment he was being saved by this shadowy figure, then the next a person he'd never seen before was forcing him to drink something. Seconds later, he was fully healed, and that's when the cameraman would finally realize this could be the person he thought it was. It was a truly perplexing turn of events I'm sure would shock anyone. Now, the reason Sung didn't show up sooner was because the broadcast he was watching was delayed. By the time he realized it was 10 minutes behind...
Oh! Oh, okay.
The damage to Korea's S-ranks had already been done. Luckily for him, he was able to save the weakest person present first. Sung's action after would be the most important since...
Yo, that's such an important detail. Like, damn.
With the other S-ranks still in a dire situation, he needed a way to clear the ants without injuring those they were attacking. The easiest way would have been to just use Tusk, but there was no guarantee such an attack wouldn't hit the others too. So that's when he decided to go with Iron, using his taunt skill to divert the ants' focus pretty much immediately. Sung would praise Iron for a job well done, then summon the rest of his soldiers to eliminate as many ants as possible.
Let's go, team!
So, given that Beck now had an opening, he would move his teammates to the safest corner he could find, then finally take in what exactly was happening. Ma, who'd had his eyes injured in the fight before, could only ask to know what it was Beck was seeing. It was a question to which Beck would answer everything was okay now, since for him that's exactly what he was feeling. That reassurance was actually more for himself though, since it was only moments ago Beck fully believed he was going to die. He had even subconsciously called out for help the moment Sung made his entrance.
Right.
So, to see Sung easily handle these ants that gave them so much trouble, well, that provided Beck with a huge sense of relief. His hope of survival was now fully rekindled. As far as he was concerned, the aid of Sung was far more reliable than the power of over 20 Japanese S-rank hunters combined.
That's crazy. It's so cool, isn't it? Oh.
He knew all he needed to do now was just sit back and watch. Beck would then tell the cameraman to keep the camera pointed at Sung because as someone who'd glimpsed his power so many times before, Beck knew the country would want to witness the amazing show he was about to put on.
Yeah, like, let's witness our new hero. Let's see our new hero in action.
After hearing all about Sung through the experiences of others, Beck sat eagerly anticipating a power he'd finally get to witness himself for once. So, though the job of Beck and the other S-ranks were done now, the job of the cameraman was far from finished. It was by the time he realized what he needed to do, though, that Sung would have cleared almost half the ants already. He had killed so many he actually lost count, and it was so easy that he found himself completely unbothered by them.
Nice.
Compared to the enemies of the Demon Castle, these ants were quite literally just that. That's when Sung would decide to clear the ants out faster, leading him to resurrect the dead ones without a care for who was watching. Unlike how the anime didn't even show it, Sung wasted no time creating more soldiers for his shadow army.
Oh, so as he's going. That's so sick. Jesus, I love that. It's amazing. Just add to it, and then you've got more to fight with in the fight.
He didn't even bother to hide it either, so everyone across the world bore witness to his shadow extraction.
Oh!
None could actually understand what it was, but this ability was definitely no longer a secret now.
That's amazing.
So, the cameraman was the first to be overwhelmed by the shock of it, since shadowy ants pulling themselves from the ground was far beyond his own personal scope of comprehension.
Yeah, like, what the you literally be like, what the fuck is going on right now?
Beck was a little more calm himself, but with this being his first time witnessing Sung's summons as well, he was more so in a state of awe. Now, it didn't take long for the shadows to outnumber the living, so with Sung's army of darkness pushing back their counterpart, all those watching gained a little hope again. It was a stark contrast from the bleak despair they felt only moments ago. Since the last thing they saw was the Ant King dismantling their hunters, what the viewers were experiencing was quite literally a roller coaster of emotions. Like, victory seemed assured when the queen was defeated, then defeat seemed imminent after the Ant
Just
King
straight
fell.
after it, it's like, oh
Despair
god.
took over when reports confirmed Min's death, then everyone was in a frenzy wanting to know what happened after. They couldn't bear not knowing what happened to the other hunters. It was once the feed was restored and victory appeared in sight again that Sung's one-sided massacre would bring forth all sorts of emotion. Most were ecstatic by the sudden turn of events, while those who lost loved ones shed tears knowing revenge was near for them. None knew who this mysterious hunter on their screen was, but what they did know was that they wanted to cheer for him. It was excitement that only escalated when they found out he was a Korean too. For the TV
Home
director
team,
who had
home
stressed
team,
for
let's
some time
go!
now, finally he could breathe a sigh of relief since it was looking like his gamble paid off. Min's death made it feel like the world was coming to an end, but the arrival of Sung showed him the light at the end of the tunnel. It was the greatest feeling to know things might work out okay. The remaining hunters just needed to make it to extraction. For the Japan team who withdrew already, any agreement made with them was now null and void.
Definitely.
Any loot would no
Fuck
longer
off.
be shared, and if Korea wanted, they definitely had a right to demand reparations themselves. Things certainly weren't going the way Japan expected.
Not at all, and I'm glad.
Matsumoto had thought he planned for every possible situation, yet somehow a single monster had managed to get the best of him. So, Shock couldn't even begin to describe what he was feeling right now. To make matters worse, his team couldn't even track where that monster was anymore. The same satellite they'd used to monitor the energy levels of the Queen now couldn't find a monster that was significantly more powerful.
Stronger, yeah, wow.
So the whole thing just didn't make sense to them. They were able to spot it back when it fought Goto, but the large bright light which indicated its powerful presence before was now nowhere to be seen. Not a single speck of light indicated that level of power anywhere. At first, such an anomaly was utterly incomprehensible, up until Matsumoto realized what was really happening.
What's that?
You see, as soon as he thought about it a little bit longer, that's when he understood how this monster was hiding itself. It had perfect control over its magical energy, and as a result could turn it on and off whenever it wanted. This was why the research team failed to spot it before the raid, and it's the reason why Goto ended up being defeated by it. Japan had assumed their satellite data was all they needed, so never once did they consider the possibility of anything beyond that. It didn't occur to them that the ants would evolve in a way that could deceive them. So, this was what Matsumoto would consider the perfect failure, and as a result, this single oversight would cost them dearly. It was a steep price he fully expected to get worse, since to him it was only a matter of time before this monster crossed the ocean and reached the mainland. And with no hunter capable of standing against it, well, let's just say the potential calamity was terrifying. It was then that Matsumoto's team would relocate the monster back in the Queen's chamber, indicating it was no longer suppressing its magical energy like how it was before. This made Matsumoto assume it was fighting the Korean team, which, if all went well, would take them out too.
What a prick. He's like, yeah, let it do the job. Ugh.
It was a potential silver lining he thought he could get his hopes behind, up until a separate spot of light indicated another strong presence. At first glance, this light seemed to be as big as the monsters, but on closer examination it actually looked bigger. Not only that, but this second light was also surrounded by hundreds of smaller ones. Sung's shadows were so individually strong that each could be viewed as their own powerful presence by Japan's satellite.
That's sick.
It was an oddly beautiful phenomenon none of Japan's researchers had ever seen before. Matsumoto would then demand to watch the Korean broadcast himself, unveiling the live-action version of what the satellite was showing him. The part of it that made their observations all the more terrifying was the fact the massive source of light was confirmed to be coming from one single person. No one could believe this lone hunter was capable of producing all that. Chairman Go's reaction was exactly
Let's
as we saw,
go!
but if you're
He's
wondering
so-
why he
I love
wasn't
it.
in
He
the
loves
mission
him.
control room from the get-go,
As soon as Sung's doing anything, he's like, yes, that's the lad, that's the guy. He's gonna be the next generation of what I'm passing behind.
it's because his weak heart wouldn't have been able to handle it. I mean, we saw how excited he got just from seeing Sung, and even that was enough to give him a heart attack. So, whether the mission ended in success or failure...
Which is such a shame.
just-
I'd love to see him in a fight. I hope... I mean, I don't, because I don't want to see the guy die.
being part of it
Because he's absolutely class, but, like, it'd be cool that, like, you have a moment where we see how strong he actually is, fighting with Sun at some point. That would be amazing.
was too much of a risk for him. It's the reason we see his personal doctor next to him in the manhwa. Seeing Sung extract the shadows of the dead wasn't good for him either, since that too got his heart racing a mile a minute. It did also show that Sung had hid the truth from him, but that didn't matter considering what he was doing now.
Yeah, it's like he's
At this
saving
point, the
us.
chairman was only curious about why Sung didn't want to join the fight before. He could see just how excited Sung was to be there, so for a man who proclaimed to only want to fight monsters, the chairman couldn't understand why he walked away from the opportunity to fight the strongest. It was a thought Mr. Go really hoped to get an answer to. Back home, the reaction was different too, since before exchanging, he wasn't chilling on a rooftop like Batman, but was actually at home watching the raid with his mother.
Oh.
This tracks more with why he wasn't at the raid in the first place,
Yeah.
since it shows he really was spending more time his
With
family.
them, yeah, of course. That makes
In any case, it was the moment
that makes more sense. That really does make more sense.
things went bad on television that Sung would leave the room and make the switch.
Right.
It seems he stopped the TV from working too, since he likely didn't want his mother to see
see
he was
it.
a hunter yet. Unlike how Sung's mom already knows in the anime, in the manhwa and novel he's still keeping it a secret from her.
Ah, God.
He didn't want to burden her with the same feelings their dad did. Now, switching back to the raid, since saving Cha was the #1 priority, that meant getting everyone out was the most important. It was before they could that's when the Ant King would appear, once again depressing every viewer who was watching. Since the last time they saw it, it was demolishing their hunters. Now they were worried the same thing was about to happen
Happened to
again.
Saw.
After eliminating Cha in one hit only,
That was
no
mental.
one really thought a ranged mage type would do any better. So Beck would be the first to offer assistance, but Sung would insist no one step up at all. Reason being that, to him, the fight would be way faster if they didn't. It was a suggestion not many of the others could fully get behind, but decided to respect anyway due to the power Sung exhibited back when fighting the Swarm. This was actually why Beck thought Sung needed help to begin with, since with all the summons he used to clear the Swarm, Beck figured he'd be running low on mana now.
Right, yeah, okay, makes
He
sense.
was worried that Sung may run out of magical energy mid-fight or something. This was a concern that only went to confuse Sung, since maintaining his soldiers always cost him nothing. If you remember from one of my last videos, the only time Sung used mana was when he needed to regenerate his soldiers. So his magical energy was rarely, if ever, a problem for him. This, however, wasn't knowledge anyone was privy to,
Yeah, they don't
and
know,
Sung
yeah.
wasn't planning to share it with them now either. No, he instead simply stated how his summons didn't require as much magic energy as they thought. It was a statement that went to shock everyone equally, since what other weak point would Sung have if not for an unsustainable mana cost? Sung wasn't gonna reveal any more than that though, so that was a question all would have to sit on. Now, Sung had immediately recognized the Ant King, and the Ant King immediately recognized him.
Yo.
Both were extremely powerful entities, but the Ant King's observations of such was spoken the exact same way that Goto once did. This brings us now to their face-off,
There
where
it
Sung's
is.
close proximity to the Ant King would lead viewers to think the outcome was already decided. I mean, here was this monster who just ragdolled Korea's sturdiest tank, and here was Sung casually walking into melee distance of him.
Yo.
The Ant King would see this as an opportunity to end the fight in one hit only, leading to the punch which would shock the world. You see, as soon as everyone saw this mage tank a hit with his face, every person watching was fully captivated.
Yeah, of course.
When the Ant King then got blown away by the return punch, several moments were taken for viewers to process what they just saw, then it's when they finally did, cheering could be heard everywhere. The Ant King fully expected to at least send this new opponent flying, but when it neither died nor even budged, Sung barely gave it a moment to feel surprised. No, he instead immediately responded with punches of his own. They were hits whose impacts were strong enough to literally shake the entire tunnel.
Damn.
The cameraman was struggling to understand the power he was witnessing, since after seeing this ant destroy 6 S ranks like they were nothing, he never thought he'd see a display of force stronger than that. Like, he was leagues behind the S ranks above him, then they were easily gapped by the Ant King earlier. So, for Sung to come in and stomp the ant like that, well, the notion someone could be so powerful was just absurd to him. Now, when Sung saw his return punch did less damage than expected, He fully resolved himself to brute force this victory.
Right.
If all he needed to do was
Whoa!
bypass some armor, then that's exactly what he was going to do.
Oh, that's so
The
cool.
ensuing clash was a back-and-forth
Yo!
spiral that so powerful that the reverberations of energy was enough to make those in proximity sick. The cameraman was the most susceptible, so he was even experiencing a bit of vertigo. Still, he maintained his composure and even smiled, since who wouldn't when what he was broadcasting was their country's shining ray of
Yeah,
hope?
of course.
For the Ant King, who was on the receiving end of the speeddown, though its exoskeleton was likely more durable than any metal on the planet, Sung was still punching his way through it easily. The Ant King knew cracks were forming all around it, but he couldn't tell how bad it was due to a lack of pain receptors there. This in turn forced him to divert his attention to check it out, revealing the cracks had spread all across his entire body. Sung wasn't so naive as to miss out on this opportunity, since
So,
the moment
whoa,
he saw
let's
the Ant
go.
King was distracted, that's when he would hit him square in the face. It was a vicious impact that made clear beating Sung in a battle of strength wasn't possible. Luckily, the Ant King knew it had other attacks, leading to the paralysis poison skill it developed through gluttony. That went exactly as we saw, ending in another ferocious punch that for the first time actually dealt damage.
Yeah.
The impact from this one finally made the Ant King feel pain for once. That's when Sung would clue into the Ant King's emotions, which was an ability he first picked up back when he fought the High Orcs.
Right.
He didn't think much about it then, though, because there he thought he was simply reading their facial expressions and gestures. Now that he was reading a monster that had no facial expressions, that's when he started to think perhaps perception unlocked some sort of new ability. So, Sung would go on to use this in more ways than one, since sensing its fluctuating emotions now allowed him to track its presence
Right, this
easier.
fight was so
Where
good.
the Ant King's speed usually enabled him to lose his opponents quickly, Sung could track him even if he lost sight of him. He could also read his emotions in a way that allowed him to know what it was planning. So, when the Ant King's anxiety changed to happiness, that's when Sung knew its strategy had changed again. Now, the reason the Ant King didn't engage with speed to begin with is because it essentially wanted to show off its kingly powers first. Now that that wasn't working though, the Ant King knew this was no longer the time to flex. Little did he know a battle of speed was where Sung felt most confident, so despite the ant being significantly faster than it was before, keeping up with it was no more difficult than when the fight had first started. This forced the Ant King to fight on the defensive again, resulting in a constant retreat backwards that Sung took full advantage of. With every step back it took, Sung would get more confident knowing full well the type of mental shock it was going through. He could feel exactly how shaken up this ant was.
That is pretty cool.
Then
You'd
it
get
was in classic Sung.
You definitely would if you could gauge your opponent's emotions and you're getting nothing but fear every time you're striking them. That is definitely going to build up some confidence with you because you know they are lacking in confidence for dealing with this fight. You're like, I am on this.
A new fashion that he would first compliment both himself and how powerful he'd become right before committing to a series of attacks which would finish the fight. The ant's exoskeleton was all but shattered now, so Sung could go in with Critical Strike to finish it off. So it was after landing Critical Strike dozens of times over that's when the skill would upgrade itself to Mutilate. His Stomp of the Ant was what enabled this skill to evolve mid-fight. It was the damage from Mutilate which would cause the Ant King's survival instincts to kick in, leading it to fly away much like how we saw in the anime. What the ant saw behind it, though, was the absurd sight of a human flying too. This wasn't Sung's insane speed propelling him through the air, but
He's
rather
just
his
doing
ruler's
it.
touch skill elevating him to the same level
Sweet.
the Ant King
So
was.
cool to just try to run away, and
The
he's like,
Ant
I
King
got
would then
you.
resort to the only move it thought it had left, only to be shown it didn't even have numbers on Sung. Any advantages he thought it had was always immediately disproven with authority. Sung's shadows would then make light work of the Ant King's army, including Tusk, who Sung felt the need to give an extra warning to. Since his attacks were especially dangerous, Sung basically said if any of them hit the humans, then he would never summon Tusk again.
Ever again, damn.
Now, all the Ant King could feel at the end of this was a pure sense of terror unlike any he'd ever felt before. For the first time in its life, it knew fear. It also sensed what it could only describe as an insurmountable obstacle, since no matter how hard it tried, it knew it could never beat Sung. So, in these final moments before its execution, all the ant felt was complete and utter defeat. It felt absolutely inferior knowing it couldn't fulfill its sole purpose for existing. The queen made it to deal with the strong humans, yet when the strongest appeared, it couldn't do anything.
Couldn't do anything, yeah.
This was the existential thought the Ant King dealt with, while all Sung was focused on was the potential soldier he was about to gain.
So he had that in his head in the... Wow!
Smoothly,
That's interesting. So he had it in his head what he was going to do. Wow.
Sung first needed to make sure this ant was dead. He would finish the job, all while commenting how now the Ant King was looking like a proper insect. But yeah, that's pretty much it for this episode. This was truly an experience, and I'm glad that I get to share part of it with you. Now,
I do feel like there's one little bit that was left out, but I feel like he was worried it was going to be spoilers for the next episode. But I do remember someone posted a final clip from that episode from either Japan or Korea, and there were subtitles that they translated, which is why he turned his head at the end of the episode, which said, "Take my power," and that's why he turns his head like he does to cut to the thing. But I can understand why he doesn't go over that. Let's see that in the next one.
As we near the end of the season with one episode left, I hope some of you will stick around to see what I cover next.
Hell yeah.
I do these videos for other anime too, so if you want to know more about shows like ReZero, Danmachi, Tensura, and maybe even the beginning after the end,
That's the one I want!
consider subscribing to
Yes!
see
I was
those.
hoping you'd say that.
Or you can just come back whenever Season 3 comes out. Either way, the support for this series has been absolutely amazing, and I just want to thank you all for watching.
Hell yeah.
So, yeah, thank you. Until next time, though.
Ciao. I was hoping he'd do beginning after the end. Because I'm really looking forward to watching that. But again, I want to know. Yeah. So that was Boss. I'm hoping he touches upon what I just said there as well. Because he does say in the anime anyway in the last episode that that's what he heard. But I just want to know whether that actually was something in other versions of the anime that came out. But yeah, one more episode. I've already watched it, so I'll check the cut content out when it comes out. This has been Boss Check Out. And yeah, thanks for watching.